everybody. We got a great one today, for a change. And this time, I think I mean it. My guests, I got two guests today, are Harry Litman, former Deputy Attorney General of the United States and host of the Talking Feds podcast, on which I recently joined him with my other guest, George Conway, an appellate lawyer who writes a column for the Washington Post. And we get into the eclectic panorama of the indictments. I'm talking about the ones facing former President Donald Trump. He has 4 and is facing 91 counts. And I try to go through with these gentlemen how these may play out over the next several months. And it's complicated, but I couldn't have 2 better gentlemen to discuss it. There was a pretty damaging development in the Mar-a-Lago documents case. Molly Michael, a Trump aide, looks like she may be the Cassie Hutchinson of the Mar-a-Lago case. She had been handling the classified documents a lot. And at one point recently, she went to prosecutors and said that Trump had said to her, "You don't know anything about the boxes." As in, you don't know anything about the boxes. Now, unfortunately, that trial is not set till May, and we got a loose cannon for a judge there, I'm afraid, Eileen Cannon, and that trial will not be done, I'm sure, before the Republican convention, if before the 2024 election. There is also the Georgia RICO trial, where there are 18 defendants. That starts supposedly at the end of October, but Harry and George conclude that will entail several trials, even though it's one RICO case, because 2 of the defendants so far are demanding an early trial. That's Cheeseborough and Sidney Powell. And that sounds like it will go on for months and months. So the D.C. trial, the one where Trump is the sole indicted defendant, and that's supposed to start in March with Judge Chutkan, who, by all appearances, is a no-nonsense judge. It appears to be the one that will be over and done with, maybe in time to affect the Republican nomination. Trump, of course, will not testify in that trial. No defense attorney would allow him to. I'd like to see him testify just so when he puts his hand on the Bible, I could see it burst in the flames. George and Harry and I also discussed the House Judiciary hearing with the one with the Attorney General Merrick Garland from a few days ago, which was one of the ugliest and most depressing displays of everything that's wrong with today's Republican Party. It was a disgrace. And of course, this was it's mainly about Hunter Biden. That's what they focused on, and his indictment on buying a gun illegally. That was a bad one for Joe Biden, because it reminds people that Biden has a son that's 53 years old. But if you didn't watch that hearing, you did yourself a favor. Believe me, we clearly have descended into a world where Republicans have adopted an alternate reality entirely for pernicious purposes, and it's very, very ugly and extremely dangerous. They now have their impeachment inquiry, and it's not going to stop until they can find something, no matter how bogus, to bring against Biden, if they can get the votes. They have a margin of 4 in the House now, the Republicans, and there may be 5 or more somewhat sane Republican members who won't go there. Anyway, this is a fraught time. We're in a fraught time, a chaotic time, and we have a slightly chaotic one for you today. Harry Litman and George Conway, a great one, for a change. I think at one point I want to get into all the mix of these 4 trials and where you see this all being played out, because I think everybody would like to hear that from you guys, and I would. But let's start with the kind of the easiest thing today, which is Molly Michael, who said something that is pretty simple. That Trump said to her, "You don't know anything about the boxes." She worked at Mar-a-Lago for the president, former president, and this is a piece of testimony that she's given to the prosecutors. Is that right, Harry?
So it is, and not just a piece. This is the kind of thing that that they have guys like George and me there to try to translate, because it played as just sort of one more thing. They focused on the Trump scrawling to-do list on his classified docs. She actually jumps off the page to a former prosecutor, probably to George as well, because she, of all the people who have been mentioned to date, is the witness from hell for Trump, because she has no possible axe to grind. Even Frank Tavares, so-called employee number 4, he lies at first. You're not going to be able to really touch her on cross-examination. She's someone who wanted to be loyal to him and showed up, but then just wouldn't cross the line of criminality. So, trials, we think about these like hot, Klieg-like figures like Mark Meadows and stuff, but it's people like her if prosecutors have a choice.
This is a little like a Cassidy Hutchinson.
Absolutely.
My best tweet of yesterday, maybe was simply January 6th committee to Cassidy Hutchinson equals Mar-a-Lago prosecution to Molly Michael. And it's just for that reason. You think about a jury and you think about the possibilities of dirtying her up for Trump's lawyers. And remember, that's all they got because Trump won't testify. And she is really a killer witness, including, she's got a lot more, but that one statement you made, this is after she's given him a picture of all the boxes down there and they've talked about it. He obviously knows she knows about the boxes.
You don't know anything about the boxes. You don't know anything about the boxes.
Nothing about the boxes. Got it.
Now she's like, Cassie Hutchinson actually testify in the January 6th hearing. I've always wondered about that. She was such a great witness. A lot of it, what she testified to, was hearsay, but some of it wasn't. George, you have an opinion on that one?
Yeah, I mean, she was actually, but again, if to the extent that she's testifying about things that were said by criminal conspirators about what other criminal conspirators had said, that stuff gets in. It's an exception to the hearsay rule.
But she was also there when, like, on the mall, and he goes like, "They're not
not
going
to." She saw some stuff live, and she saw some stuff, but she also saw some stuff that could get in under the exception of the hearsay rule of, that co-conspirators' statements are admitted against each other.
Well, her story.
Can I just
was
make
very
one?
Dramatic.
Just want to follow up George's lawyer's point because it's really important.
Hey! I'm the host.
Oh, you asked the damn question.
And I was actually talking.
Yeah, you're right. You were, and I was,
we're bad.
Inexcusable.
We're bad.
When people do that, I just hit the silent button on my podcast. Okay, which is Talking Feds, by the way. Okay, sorry about that.
What a bad bunch we are.
Okay, now I forgot what I was saying, so go ahead. Which is actually true. But let's all listen to each other as we're going, okay?
Yeah. I just want 15 seconds while you collect your thoughts. But this lawyer's point, that's our value here, right? Otherwise, we're just, who the hell are we? But it's really important to note, Al, co-conspirator statements do come in. So when Giuliani, and they have co-conspirators in the indictment, when Giuliani says it's going to be wild, Cass, and anything she hears Trump say, that's just fully admissible.
Now I'm interrupting you, but there's an awful lot that she's Meadows' assistant. So there's an awful lot of Meadows saying it's not going to be good.
And Meadows is a co-conspirator, and and so I think a lot of that stuff's going to get in. She's going to be an important witness in both the D.C. case.
Meadows is not a co-conspirator.
He's not a co-conspirator in D.C., right?
In D.C.
Right. He is in, yeah.
So let's talk about the mix of these 4 trials, because I think that everyone who's watching this, every once in a while they go like, how's this going to work? How are these 4 trials? And we know Georgia is starting earliest. We think at the end of October, we think. And then January 6th starts on January 7th. When does it start? It starts then
March.
close. Oh, March. It starts in March. So that starts in March. And if we get to the documents, that's what, in May? It's in May. And
Subject to Cannon's future rulings, but
and Cannon is a loose cannon, in an odd way. How do you see this playing out? And is there any way to actually really have a good take on how this plays out? Is what I'm asking. Now you guys aren't so ready.
George,
to
you want to start?
I think these judges are going to do their best to stay out of each other's way. And I think that Judge Chutkan is going to end up, I think she's positioned herself to go first. I think there may be a couple of smaller trials in Georgia that we'll get to preview the Georgia evidence. But I think the first trial involving Trump is going to be Chutkan and Chutkan's trial. And that's going to be a biggie. No question about it. I think I don't know how he defends all of these cases. Even if they don't conflict on the calendar, I don't think there is enough legal firepower on his side to defend all this litigation, and all he does is create more chaos because that's what he does as a malignant narcissist. And I don't know how any lawyer can, he just doesn't seem to have the capacity to retain lawyers for very long, either because he decides that they are not giving him the best advice, someone else gets in his ear, or they become government witnesses because he has to admit some kind of a crime or fraud. And it's just incredible. So I don't know how these cases get tried. And I don't think it's not going to be a defense for him in terms of, being deprived of counsel, because he's depriving himself of counsel. But I think it's all going to happen, and I think he's in deep trouble.
You don't see how it's going to happen, but then you say it's going to happen.
No, I don't see how he defends it. I see how the prosecutors bring these cases to trials and the judges try the case. I don't see how he's going to defend it in any manner that resembles any coherent or viable defense. Not only because he doesn't, even if he had the best lawyers in the world with all the time in the world, I don't know that he has a defense, particularly in the Mar-a-Lago documents case now.
Did he ever really, Harry, have a defense in the Mar-a-Lago case? It's just absent Molly Michaels' testimony. Isn't it clear that he took these documents and put them on? I love that there's this picture of them on a stage. Like, they must have a dinner theater at Mar-a-Lago, and the Mar-a-Lago improv players would have okay, we're going to take one of the documents and we're going to do a sketch around it. Okay, this is...
I could make a hat or I could make a coat.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean...
Second City comes to Mar-a-Lago.
Yeah, and it's okay, let's see. This is the Iran. This is our response if Iran gets nuclear. And wait a minute, it's this one's gone. It must have gone to Saudi Arabia for $2 billion.
Yeah. Oh wait, there's a note on the back of this one.
Right.
Can eat hamburgers.
And then the sixth member of the troupe plays Melania. Yeah. So let me try to answer your question straight up, Alf. The substance of Mar-a-Lago, what's always been intriguing about that, would they actually pull the trigger because it's not in the middle of what made him so wicked as a president, though it certainly goes to what did George call him, a malignant narcissist? But the answer is that's right. It's always been a pretty open and shut case even before Michael, given the charges. There really is no defense. Even his kind of ridiculous, fanciful suppositions, I can make anything classified. Even if a jury were to credit that, it wouldn't be a defense.
Rolling Stone just came out with a story a couple of hours ago saying that he's talking to people at Mar-a-Lago about whether he's going to have to wear an orange jumpsuit in prison.
Right. Is he in a club fed or not? But in terms of the overall bordello and how does it work, this is my best guess is, as George says, both the most important and the most likely to go quick for a number of reasons, including the resolve not just of Judge Chutkan, but sort of the whole court and the Court of Appeals.
And there's a single defendant right now.
Yeah, and the single defendant will be January 6th, and that's the most important. I think actually his odds of being tried before November 2024 in Fulton County are slight and getting slighter.
Really?
Yeah, I do. I wonder if George agrees. And Mar-a-Lago, strong case, but it's not simply if Cannon's in the tank for him, but she's an inexperienced judge. They'll be pushing at every turn to try to delay. Can they squeeze another 3 or 4 months out, especially with the classified documents, admittedly complicated issue? Probably. And then, as you say, New York is a little bit of afterthought. But so I think the ball for the country and the justice system writ large to keep their eye on is the Chutkan Trump only January 6th case. My best guess is it goes after, from what better experts than I say will be when he's sewn up the nomination, but that they reach a judgment before November, so at least people can factor that in. Bigger question is if anybody cares.
Well, it's scheduled in March. Is that what you said? It's scheduled in March.
Yeah.
And so why would it not be in March?
I think if you're Judge Chutkan or you're any judge and you want something to move fast, you set a trial date the first time around that's sooner than you actually expect, because there's going to be something. You're going to want to be reasonable so that nobody can complain on appeal. Not that it's really anything you can complain about on appeal anyway. But you can, she'll probably grant a 2-week extension here and a 2-week extension there. And I think the worst case is that it gets tried in June or July
during the convention, maybe.
Yeah, but
I agree.
It's not going to make he's not going to have any complaint about that, to my mind, in the sense that it's not going to keep him from campaigning. First of all, he's got the nomination sewed up, and he will have the nomination sewed up by Super Tuesday. He's going to have a lot of free time on his hands. Why not answer the charges?
Okay, so you mentioned that first Chesebro, is how you pronounce it?
Chesebro.
And is it Powell? And are there others who have asked to go early and claim their right to a speedy trial? And so they go first, right? I just want to sort out the sequence of things that are going to happen in all these cases, and then move on. I want to move on to the Garland hearings today.
Not only aren't there others who have moved for a speedy trial, if they were to move it now, Al, it would be later. It would be the end of the next grand jury session. But the DA has said, look, if these guys want to sever, make them waive their speedy trial rights. Otherwise, you could put them in a place and then they could jerk you around by then invoking speedy trial and getting separate trials. So I think it's those two alone.
Did you say there's another grand jury meeting? I know we had. You're
I'm
saying
sorry.
this.
Yeah, under Georgia law, your speedy trial rights are connected to grand jury sittings. That's just the way it works. And since it's later down the line, it's to the end of the next grand jury sitting.
Oh, I see. It has nothing to do with that.
So it just so happens it would be early January. But I think they're all waiving their speedy trial rights in order to try to move to sever.
To sever.
Does that make sense? The judge is insisting on it so it doesn't get too crazy with people moving to sever, then invoking speedy trial whenever it is, and having 5, 6, 7 4-month trials.
Okay, when you're saying severing, you mean I want my trial separate from others.
Yeah, from that ugly guy over there. Please don't put me in with that guy. Yeah.
This isn't the Talking Feds, which concentrates a lot on legal shit. Just be conscious of that. So yes, and can there be a number of trials in Georgia, and what does that look like? Why? Because it'd be the same witnesses testifying. It's about the same case because they're all co-conspirators in the same case. So
each one doesn't necessarily concern them. The legal term for it would be ugly as shit. And as each one goes on, there are possibilities for inconsistencies and mistakes. Judge McAfee wants to minimize. Maybe he's pushed into 3. He's now already got 2. But that scenario of 5, 6 is a nightmare.
Yeah. But what's going to be interesting, though, is, there could be inconsistencies, but both sides will learn from each trial. And the question is, who does that help? It's too early for me to say because we haven't seen the evidence. And obviously the evidence, although it's going to be the same RICO conspiracy that they're all charged with, regardless of where the defendants are in that conspiracy, obviously the evidence, there'll be different emphases because you're going to have to prove the participation in the conspiracy and focus the jury on the participation by the particular defendants who are on trial in their participation in the conspiracy.
Okay, to sum up, Georgia may start first, but could be several trials.
Right.
And by starting first, meaning Cheeseborough and Powell and maybe some others asked to go first, and it may be separated into 3 trials.
Right, and the big kahuna may not get tried next year.
Yeah.
And January 6th trial set to start in March, but maybe a little later. But she is intent,
Yes.
Chutkan, on getting it going. So that's probably going to be the big one and the shortest one because it's one defendant. And then the documents one, which seems to be a lock. Maybe we don't know when that will be. Okay, with that's the trials, and then New York we doesn't matter.
A 10-second point to add, which is the Mar-a-Lago case. If the 2 other defendants, De Oliveira and Nauta, as they really should, plead and cooperate, that simplifies and streamlines that trial.
Okay, let's go to. I was watching something that was really depressing today, which is the Garland hearings. I don't know if either of you tuned into this.
I refuse.
Yeah, that was smart of you and dumb of you and me, Harry. It was ugly. Jordan, somebody should find his sport coat, first of all. But what a monster. And Harry, since you watch, there are really like 2 in this. We have fact and fiction. On the Republican side, they were pushing stuff that we knew wasn't true. And Democrats would respond somewhat well and tell the truth. And then it would come back to some vicious Republican who I didn't know who he was that would just scare the shit out of me because it seemed like this is what the Republican Party has become. And George, you weren't watching wisely, but you are one of the founders of the Lincoln Project. I've talked to Stuart Stevens. We've had him on a couple times. He says it was all a lie. That was his book. I don't want to go into your past, whether you believe that Republican Party was always a lie, but I think there were good Republicans, and, I understand conservatism and not letting the government do too much. I understand the theories about that, and I served with some Republicans who I respected. But Jesus Christ, Jesus Christ, this is horrible.
They've completely gone off the rails. I mean, whatever. I didn't read Stewart's book, but I get it. I get what he's probably saying in the book, which is that Republicans writ large purported to believe in certain things, and many did. But the political consultants, it's really become a party that's completely nihilistic and actually doesn't believe in anything. And that was demonstrated by how Donald Trump took over. And now it's all just performance art. It's got nothing to do with governing. It's got nothing to do with fact. It's got nothing to do with reality. Merrick Garland can go up there and say whatever, say anything about, anything in the Justice Department, particularly the prosecution of Hunter Biden. It doesn't matter to them. If they charge Hunter Biden, well, the charges should have come sooner and there should have been more significant charges. If they didn't charge Hunter Biden, well, then you're obviously covering up. If you appoint a special counsel, you should have done that earlier, and you appointed the wrong one who's going to fix the case. If you don't appoint a special counsel, so how can you do that without appointing a special counsel? I mean, it doesn't matter. No matter what he does, they're going to criticize him for not doing something else, and they're just going to make stuff up. I mean, that's just what they do. It's all about performance. It's just all performance to get people to click the button, to give them money. These people actually don't care. I mean, you can see it with the spending bills. The core element, the core group running the House, essentially, holding the House hostage, they don't care about governance. They don't care about even having a majority. They don't want to have a majority because all they want to do is just stir up trouble. And it's easy to do that as a member of a minority. And so they don't care. They don't care what happens, what they do. And they don't care whether their colleagues who are in the marginal districts lose their races. They just don't care. It's a party that is.
Well, there are so few marginal districts, but they will. That will happen.
But there are a few of them. They were speaking out
Yeah.
yesterday. A couple guys from New York. They were like vibers. There's enough to make a difference to turn the house back over.
Look, I agree with everything both of you said, but it felt like a new low to me. Just to add, it's not just that it's false, but they know it's false. That's the first. And it was the combination of the sort of kangaroo court and like crusades of it, where they were, taking this, lifetime public servant who everyone knows, if nothing else, he doesn't raise his right hand and then lie, and just, treating him like a complete, criminal. The fix is in, and that screaming match with the one idiot who was, trying to accuse him of being prejudiced against religious groups and the like. So there was always these moments of fatigue or pushback, but there was more than that here, and it was repulsive. It was shorn of anything other than theater. And the one other point is the theater really doesn't even have to do with Garland. It has to do with Biden and trying to mischaracterize all these things as Biden prosecutions.
They're trying to connect Hunter, of course, with his dad. In Talking Feds, when we were together, I brought up alternative facts, and I kind of apologized or brought it up in a George, that is associated with.
You're doing it again. You're doing it again.
I'm doing it again, and we can cut. And we can cut this out.
I didn't mean to say then about your.
No, but you kind of went, okay, it's fine.
Alternative what is what I said.
Yeah, okay. It just seems to me that the point of that was there's fake news, and fake news puts out fake facts. That's why we need alternative facts. And it seems now that's it. That's it. That setup means you can't believe anything. And that is what I saw today, is that if you watch that, one side was saying, and it seems like the side that is not saying stuff that's just reliably not true is the Republican side. And that's why you're with Lincoln Project, one of the founders. But I don't know how you do democracy this way.
You can't. Yeah. And with that, yeah.
That's the bigger point, right?
We had Ann Applebaum on, and she talked about basically where kind of this started. And she talked about the KGB in the 80s spreading and doing it in a really interesting way by putting stuff out in India and Malaysia and stories around the world in countries you wouldn't necessarily think of to spread a rumor, put them in a number of places that the CIA had created AIDS. And that spread and spread. And because it was coming from a whole bunch of different sources, that was sort of the first use of that kind of fake news. But what happens is that if you can't agree on facts, and you can't agree on, I think she said, if you can't agree on what happened yesterday, you can't discuss what to do about it. And what I saw today was scary because it was the most concrete example of it's impossible now.
No, you're absolutely right. And what's happened is it's become a kind of addiction on the right, because what happened was they were feeding this stuff to rile up a portion of the public, and they can't turn it off now. Fox News, shows is a perfect example. They so bought into telling people what they want, their deepest, darkest fantasies about being conspired against, and how terrible Democrats are, and how terrible the deep state is, that they earned their way into a $750 million settlement.
But now they know. Now they actually, at the end, sometimes they go to commercial and say, Fox News does not believe the election was stolen, to get out of the next lawsuit. But they will take things like they will. I saw one thing they did where okay, Biden is doing a state visit. He flies in. There's a red carpet. He goes on the red carpet, and then they take him aside to explain who he's going to meet, et cetera, and how this event is going to take place. And he's on the edge of the red carpet, and he goes, okay, all right, where do I go? And all they play is, where do I go?
And there isn't a politician alive who hasn't had a staffer do that. Say, sir, senator, you need to, okay, you're going to go, they're going to introduce you over here. You have to walk over here. And that's, because that's what the advanced people do. That's what they're supposed to do.
I used to say, where do I go a lot?
Yeah.
That was one of my go-tos. Where do I go?
Yeah, where do you go? Yeah.
And to George's point that you can't turn it off, Garland had two positive messages that he tried to carry in his, intro and some of his pushback responses. One was no fear or favor. We are not the president's lawyer. We're not Congress's lawyer. We're the people's lawyer. Certainly on Hunter Biden, I had nothing to do with stuff. But he also made a big point about all these threats that Chutkin people and the prosecutors have received. And this is my point about not turning it off. He's worse than a mob boss in a way, because he'll say crap and then he'll incite lone wolves, like the guy who stormed the Cincinnati FBI office or the woman who threatened to kill Chutkin. And there really is a scenario out there that they can't control. And if anything, they're just stoking the flames of, where some crazy ass guy does something, terrible to a member of the criminal justice or court family, and they're indifferent about it. He's obviously tangibly worried about it, and there's, they're being irresponsible on top of mendacious.
And the book that's just been written about Romney describes how Romney explains.
That was unbelievable.
How basically some people voted against impeaching Trump the second time around because they were afraid. They had physical fear for their families. And remember what happened with Lindsey Graham when he was accosted at the airport. He changed his tune. So the intimidation is happening in all spheres, not just in the bureaucracy, but it's happening on Capitol Hill. And the other thing is more fundamental is that the distrust that is being sown by people who are supposedly for law and order against the legal system, against prosecutors, against enforcement of the criminal law is so corrosive, even apart from the physical threats to the people who are charged with enforcing those laws.
Okay, let me just very quickly on Hunter Biden, since that was tangentially or more than tangentially about Hunter Biden, and what they're trying to do is connect Hunter Biden with his dad and say his dad was got some of this money, or I don't know what they're exactly saying. But you've been following this, haven't you, Harry? And where is that now? What are they trying to establish? I heard Burisma a lot today, and isn't it the case that it was Vice President Biden got on the phone with some people who had hired Hunter or were about to hire Hunter and said, "Yeah, hi, I'm hello," and which she probably shouldn't have done. But that is not a crime, right?
Yeah, all right. So Republicans in Congress are trying to establish that. That's the most they have is, was he trying to exercise influence as vice president 8 years ago for his son? You're probably right that, Bo, his other son, had just died. He's a very big family guy. Maybe he was on a couple phone calls, but this is all they got to impeach the current president of the United States. That's what they're trying to establish. What David Weiss is trying to establish is
David Weiss is the special prosecutor who was the U.S. attorney in Delaware, and there was a deal that was made, and then that was thrown out, and then he was made special prosecutor, and now there's indictment about the gun.
Yeah, but you missed something that happened in between, and it's the only thing we can point to, which is a huge outcry on Capitol Hill along the lines of what we saw today from the Jim Jordans of the world. And it sure looks as if, the big fact here is this is a charge that's just never brought by the Department of Justice unless somebody lies on a form. They shouldn't do that. It's against the law, but you never bring it unless they use the gun for another crime. It's a straw purchase, something like this. So a charge has been brought against Biden now.
And he kept for how many days? And then
11 days unloaded. His girlfriend throws in the dumpster. Yeah, it's, among other things, it's a dog of a case. But the fact that they brought it, it's just, I think, can't account for it other than from the outcry. And this is, in fact, where, Garland has made such a big point today. I was totally hands off. I let Weiss do whatever he wanted, and he did. Effectively, he's like an independent counsel, old style, outside of all the strictures of the department. And he did bring this forward. And the big fact to me is it's just not a charge that would otherwise have been brought. And all we can really point to is people screaming at Weiss from the Hill. That's not good. In fact, it stinks.
And screaming today at Merrick Garland, who right. I can't think of a guy who has served his country with more dignity.
Such a class act. When they fucked him on the Supreme Court, never said anything. Such a class act.
Yeah, it's and then you see Jim Jordan screaming at him, and you go like, "Why? What is this picture?"
Really?
Okay, so there's that impeachment inquiry on Biden. They're looking for some? Are they looking for something, or they have? I mean, what do they think they're impeaching him on? Usually, I would think something happens. The president does something. And then you look whether you should impeach him. He hires people to break into a place, to find out information from the Democratic National Committee headquarters, and then he pays them off, and he, orders people to go into Daniel Ellsberg's office before that. That happens, and then you impeach. You think about impeaching him, and then you tell him no, the votes aren't there, and he resigns. Okay, that's one. The two is you have sex with an intern, you lie about it, and then you impeach the guy. Then there's you threaten the new president of Ukraine that we won't send you the weapons that you need to fight Russia unless you accuse Biden of doing something wrong.
And then you release a summary of the call that says you did exactly that.
Well, I don't know if that was released. That was released by a whistleblower, right?
No. It was the White House released that after the whistleblower filed the complaint. The White House said, "Okay, this shows we're innocent."
Perfect call. Perfect call.
It's like, huh? What are you talking about?
So that's an impeachment, or you lose an election and you encourage people to, but this is got to be great to impeach him. If we could find something.
Well, sometimes they just don't have the stuff, so you got to go look for it. I guess. I mean, that's the theory. No, it's
just
crazy.
An inquiry.
Just an inquiry. We're just asking questions here. He must have done something bad. We know that. So let's figure out what it is. Oh, that it seems perfectly reasonable to your average Fox News viewer, I guess, or Newsmax.
I guess so. So now, does that put pressure on them to find something? And are they going to? They're going to say they found something, and it's going to be Burisma and fire. They brought this up today at the hearing, which is that he wanted to fire this corrupt prosecutor that everybody in the State Department thought should be fired. And they brought that up today as if he was doing it on behalf of Burisma.
Right.
That's what they did.
This thing that has been debunked, that was debunked years ago. It's just crazy.
Well, that didn't matter.
What we're going to see is they're just going to be cycling through random shit, random allegations. Some will be new, some will be recycled. It's just all about noise making. Okay, it doesn't. Nothing has to connect anything that happened yesterday or will happen tomorrow. It's just making noise.
And it's not even throwing spaghetti against the wall and seeing what sticks. No. It's throwing shit against the wall and seeing what slides down.
It's just, I don't even think it's a shit. He's saying he's shit against the wall. It's just throwing it up in the air and picking it up again and throwing it up in the air and picking it up again. And that's what they're going to do.
Your guys' metaphors are definitely getting a little down there. But yeah, look, the other thing.
I don't know what better metaphor.
We're dealing with something that
we know the difference on the Al Franken podcast between spaghetti and shit for sure. All what they want, I think, is just what George says. You just want that, and this is why Trump pushed Marjorie Taylor Greene and others to do it. You just want that to be evoked again so that people not paying much attention or who are disposed toward Trump can just say, yeah, so he's been indicted 4 times, including for trying to foment a coup. But Biden, they're investigating an impeachment too.
Or people that are paying a lot of attention. People who are paying a lot of attention to Fox.
The old, remember what Bannon's phrase was? Flooding the zone with shit. Right. That's what they're doing. That's all they do now.
So I'm quoting Bannon.
Yes, Bannon explained.
Flooding the zone with shit.
Flooding the zone with shit, and that's what they do. That is the game plan.
And it's not just Fox, by the way. It's OAN, but it's also social media, and we now have again, I'm going back to belaboring this, but we have 2 sets of information, and one of them is just bullshit. And today's hearing was the worst example of that. Anything else you guys want to bring up?
I wanted to ask you a question on this, Al, if I could, because the Romney book that George mentions really focuses, I think there was a moment that we will point to as when everything could have maybe been resolved, and that was when McConnell refused to vote for impeachment, even as he was saying that what he's done is impeachable. He's your former colleague.
There's no doubt that the president responsible for January 6th.
I mean, do you think he feels it? Do you think he knows that he failed the republic? What? How do you read Mitch McConnell these days?
Well, I mean,
I want the impression. I like the impression.
Right.
Yeah. And that the people who invaded the Capitol did so on his instructions and smeared shit on the statue of John Quincy Adams. Feces. Yeah. And I mean... And there's no doubt that had they had the time, they would have murdered every Democrat member of Congress. And yet, I voted to acquit.
Well, he did say, in his defense, there is a criminal law.
Oh, that's right.
He did say that.
Well, it's partly why we're in that mess now.
And that's what we're doing now.
More than it should. Yes.
We should actually people should play that a lot during these prosecutions.
Do you think if you gave him the truth serum, he'd admit he fucked that up, or what would he say?
Well, that's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. That's not going to happen, George. And we really deal with things that will happen, things that have happened.
Oh,
I know.
I want to have my own alternative reality.
I would like to have
seriously.
Fair.
George Conway was on the sodium pentothal podcast. That's a good one.
Yeah. Let me go to McConnell. He's been very destructive to the Senate. When I first got in there, I was the 60th, except Ted Kennedy was ill. So I was the 59th for a while until we only had 60 for a few months, you may remember. Yeah. But he filibustered more executive nominees during his time, during Obama's years, than had been filibustered in the entire previous history of the nation. He did everything he could to make Obama a one-term president. And this is at the time remember he said that to his caucus. Yeah. And this is at a time where we had the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression. That's who he is. And the Merrick Garland, we were talking about Merrick Garland today. I can't think of a more exemplary public servant and judge and brilliant. And he would not take him up because he said, you can't have an election, or you can't have a Supreme Court justice confirmed during an election year. Well, that was February, and Scalia died.
Yeah.
And then, of course, when Coney Barrett comes in, it's 8 days. She's sworn in 8 days before the election. So McConnell is just on, and that's given us, Dobbs, and that's given us the 6-3 majority that is an incredibly pernicious majority. McConnell is as bad as anybody. And just the fact that he is, thank God, he's still for funding Ukraine. So I'm sorry about that. But you have worse guys. And more they're coming in. But what Romney has said doesn't surprise me. I've seen that. Of course, people, and it wasn't, some of them were worried about the security for their family, but it was like, I'm worried about my job. I just want to keep my job. And if I vote to impeach, I might lose the next election.
8 of the 10 are gone now who in the House who voted to impeach.
Yeah, well, they went right away, and Cassidy's still there, but Romney voted for impeachment, and I'm not sure. I don't know how much of that book goes into can you win again in Utah. It would be interesting if that's why he's not one of the reasons. We'll never know unless we give him Georgia's truth serum, if that's one of the reasons that he's not running. But what he said in the book is very valuable, but it's also very true and very sad. So there. Well, guys, thank you.
Thanks for cheering us up.
Yeah.
Wait a minute. So we always want to end on a good note.
Okay.
We always want an upbeat note. Young people, aren't they great? And don't they give us hope because they are growing up in a much more multicultural society, and I think that they're going to be less racist.
Well, I mean, then there's a flip side to that. The flip side is that, I don't know. I mean, I think one of the more bizarre generations in the history of this country will be. I mean, I'm a baby boomer. I'm born in '63, and I get you are, Al. That generation. What the fuck happened with that generation? And they've now, it's the Fox News cohort. It's completely, a lot of it, the people. I mean, that's, if you look at the demographics of the networks. I mean, Fox News has a grip on the older population, and that's why they're aging out, to put it nicely, and that's gonna change the country immeasurably over the next 20 years if we get there.
If we get there.
All right, I just want to follow Al's instruction though and combine these things.
Note.
Yeah, here's the positive note that I commend to everyone. When baby boomers were young and happy and optimistic, they just come out with an unknown tape previously of the Beatles playing for an hour at a prep school in England in 1963, a minute and a half before they conquered the world. And they're up there in their kind of, deadpan, energetic way. And all baby boomers and younger ones should listen to it and get happy.
All right.
Okay. The answer is listen to the Beatles.
Listen to the Beatles. All right.
And remember the spirit of youth that once brought you here.
Well, I hope you enjoyed listening. That beautiful music is by Leo Kottke, the great Leo Kottke. I want to thank Peter Ogburn for producing this podcast. We'll talk again next week.